Raising the Conversation, Season 3, Tomorrow's Church. A podcast by the MacRae Centre for Faith and Culture at Acadia Divinity College, with your host Joel Murphy, facilitator of trend research and analysis here at the MacRae Centre.
Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm excited for this conversation today, as always. It's the case, I keep on saying that. But today I'm talking with John Campbell, who's the Reverend John Campbell, who's the Director of Development and Technology for Education here at Acadia Divinity College, but has been a pastor previously and is around the ministry world. And very excited for a conversation as we think about and consider artificial intelligence, so AI. John and I were talking a little bit before this and recognizing that the conversation we have now, because of the rapid rate of innovation and change, the specifics might not be relevant tomorrow. And so who knows when this will actually go out and be live. But hopefully we can speak in some generalities that will be helpful around what artificial intelligence is and how it connects to the church. I also want to preface it saying that I think conversations around AI can be concerning for a number of people within the church context, and we'll talk a little bit about maybe why that is. But that in talking about AI and what some positive pieces are, some of the negative pieces, it's really about, as we approach it, I think, how can we be thoughtful and intentional around what we say yes to and what we don't say yes to. And how to say, like, what it's not a whole-scale adoption of, yes, this is amazing, here we go, but it's also not just a quick dismissal of not okay. And so I'm excited for that conversation today, John, and to hear your input, and obviously in your work, you're very much connected to it. So could you maybe, just before we start, introduce yourself, what do you do, and then we'll hop into kind of the discussion.
Yeah, well, let me say thank you, first of all, for having me here for the conversation. I think it's an important one. There are many important conversations that I know that you're having around different spots, and AI is one of those many things and things that we need to talk about. So yeah, like I said, I'm the Director of Development. So in that role, I work with our team here at the college to raise support, work with donors, churches, foundations to help pay for what we do. And really the bottom line is making sure that finances never get in the way of people being equipped to do what God's called them to be. So a lot of my work revolves around that. And on the tech side, so I handle the day in, day out tech needs, both in the classroom and outside the classroom, really just striving to support students and faculty to effectively use technology to accomplish what they are called to do. My favorite technology is invisible technology. So when it doesn't get in the way and when it actually is helpful for people. And so that means I get to play with a lot of tech, everything from outfitting rooms with new things, trying new things, experimenting, working with people, how to use the technology better for the mission of God. So yeah, that's what I did. Like I said, I pastored for a number of years, and my background is originally was in computer science and IT, and so I bring all of that with me into the role here at Acadia.
Yeah, and so you're the perfect talk, and you know like the Atlantic provinces really well, obviously, and know our people, and so, but I think your insights can go across Canada as well as beyond. So
yeah, and even over this last little bit, we've been working with. Obviously internally, but churches around Atlantic Canada, especially through the pandemic, helping them wrestle with, how do they respond and their tech needs, and working with kind of off the side of the desk with other seminaries, other post-secondary education institutions, because Acadia has this long history of using tech, and, I get to fill the shoes of people who came before me, like, the Craig Heberts and the Glenn Woodens and the Danny Zachariases, so, this place has a culture of playing with and using technology, and I think doing it well, so it's great.
That's amazing. All right, well, so I guess like the first question to hop into, and I know you have been engaging with and thinking a lot about AI in the church, both from a practical, what are tools we can use, but also in terms of theologically, what are the implications and the ethical considerations when thinking about AI in the church. So in this work, why do you think why are there some hesitations from individuals within the church or uncertainty as we think about the connection or intersection between AI and Christian ministry?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things going on. So I think, first of all, it's new and it's moving quickly. So I think there's just a lack of understanding. I mean, even using the term AI is extremely broad. There are many types of AI. Some kinds of AIs we've been using for a long time, like, Siri on our smartphones, or autocorrect and spelling, and the algorithm that runs Google or picks our Netflix shows. They're there, and we may not always think of those as AI, but they are a form of it. The explosion, I think, of the generative AI that we see with like OpenAI, ChatGPT, and others has really brought a lot of attention because just huge steps in the technology in short periods of time. So there's just a newness, and sometimes, just as humans with everything, when something's new and we don't understand it, there's questions and lack of understanding. It's it's scary. And when you look back at the history of in church history, anytime new technologies came up, whether it be the written form or the books or the Gutenberg press or broadcast television or whatever, the church has always gone through this period of wrestling with understanding what it is, and the theological debates and all of that, as we've tried to wrestle with what is this, is it good, what's the ethical use, and how and should we as a church kind of use it. So number one, I think there's that. Once we get past that and actually start having the discussion, which I think we're starting, maybe, hopefully, to get there. I mean, I certainly am trying to have this conversation. I don't know how much is actually happening out there. But sometimes our conversations, when we talk about things like AI, get stuck on the wrong things. So, for example, in post-secondary education, so we're a seminary, university setting, and when I hear other people within, not necessarily the college, but the university, larger, or other schools, when they talk about AI, sometimes it can just get caught on, did you know that students are using it to cheat? Right? Like as if student cheating is a new phenomenon that, education hasn't always had to deal with in its various forms. And I think in the church world, we might get stuck on the same kind of conversation. Oh, well, lazy students are using AI to cheat on assignments, and in the church world as well, lazy pastors are going to use it to cheat on sermons, and the conversation's not nuanced. It gets stuck there. There's a negative example, and yes, that's a valid concern that we should have. We don't want students using it to somehow circumvent their learning. We don't want pastors to lean on this thing as a crutch to unethically be, performing parts of their work or whatever it is. But sometimes that it just kind of gets stuck there. But once you get past that, I think there's a couple of things that underlying that's really driving the reaction to AI. The two things. One is it has potential shifts in what pastors do. And the second is kind of the theological implications of this technology. When it comes to the shifts of the tasks we do, pastors, like I said, I've been a pastor, I've been here. We have this bad habit of identifying or tying our self-worth or our identity to the things that we do, right? And so it's we take great joy, and we should, in counseling people and preaching and preparing worship services and weddings and funerals, and I mean, all those things that go into it. And if AI comes in to either augment or even totally replace one of my functions that I've historically identified with, that hits very personally, right? And then if I don't do that, then what do I do? Who am I? Right? And so it's a personal attack, right? Like it's that fear, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to, people aren't going to look at me the same way. I mean, pastoring as we know it is over. Like there's all this kind of fear that understandably gets caught up in that. and this isn't unique to pastoring. I think this happens to every profession. I think it happened through the Industrial Revolution for some people, when Industrial Revolution really affected kind of what we would generally refer as like blue collar workers with automation and all that sort of thing. We're living through the same sort of revolution, I think, for white collar, or clerical collar work. And so there's those kinds of part. And then, like I said, the theological part, and this is where we're trying to, certainly as a school, but others are trying to wrestle with this to understand what are the theological implications. And again, the church has had to wrestle with this every time a different piece of technology comes out. When Galileo starts looking at the universe and starts suggesting that the universe circles around the sun and not the earth because of his scientific observation, whatever, that through the whole understanding of theological place of humans and who we are, like it had theological implications. When the printing press was developed, all of a sudden the role of the pastor as the sole reader and interpreter of Scripture starts to be chewed away, because all of a sudden now we could produce Bibles in the common language, which obviously had huge implications in the Reformation and beyond. I mean, that had theological implications. And so for AI, we're sitting there and wrestling with some of these questions. I don't know that a lot of people can articulate what those questions are, right? When it comes around to what is human, the Imago Dei, what is our, there's all this kinds of thing, sometimes the questions come out in can AI write a sermon and deliver it? And would the Spirit of God use it to lead someone towards knowledge of salvation? Right? So it's about is God really the God of everything? Is he really, omnipotent? Would he use these technological systems, or are they devoid of the Spirit? Metaphysically, is this something different? So there's all these kind of questions that maybe we're not prepared to have, or they're at least coming at us in a very different way than how we've dealt with them before. So I think it's all of this and probably more that's kind of wrapped up in people's fear and reaction and uncertainty, around the topic of AI.
And I think those are all really compelling, and even can the Holy Spirit speak through AI is a compelling question. And I think the reason why I think this question is important and helpful for us to start with around any conversation involving artificial intelligence is because I think we just need to recognize that as that being okay. The hesitations, the concerns, the questioning. I think that's actually good for us as for Christian leaders to be holding, considering the implications of this tool. But I think engaging with it intentionally and thinking about it, and saying we are not going to choose to, even if they through that process, the choices, we are going to choose not to engage and use artificial intelligence technology within our church community because X, Y, and Z. I think to be able to have that that questioning, I think is good. Yeah. We just need to be able to engage in it versus the quick either let's do everything or no, we're not even going to touch it. I think that's why I think this question is important.
It is, and I was just you were there with me at a recent gathering of church leaders here in Atlantic Canada, and you had a workshop that you and Jody Porter put on, and I ran into one of the participants who's a friend of mine, a colleague, local pastor, and just passing in the hallway, he was just he asked the question and said, what if the faithful Christian response is to not engage? And it wasn't this, this is not from a person who's just fearful and whatever. It was actually a very deep, thoughtful question. And, and so I think we need to have the place where those, like you said, where those questions can be wrestled with. And you know what, we're standing in good Christian tradition when we do so, because these are not new questions. And we've seen the church's response to these questions, and some of it has caused what might be seen as division in the church, certainly launching of different traditions, and have sent evangelicals this way, and mainline, so there's some of that, but there's also beauty in the freedom of diversity in those approaches, and I think our approach and response to AI will be varied amongst traditions and Christians in the way we do it. and that'll be good because it will help us to reach and minister to different segments of people in different times and places that are contextually relevant to us. So, yes, there are certainly going to be ethical aspects of this, like anything that could be misused, that we need to be paying attention to. It doesn't let us off the hook of just saying, okay, then we really don't have to think about it. Just go and do as you see right, in our own eyes. Like, no, that's not the takeaway. But yeah, I'm like you, and I'm not, this is not a theological sword that we are going to die on. But it's an important issue, I think, to wrestle with the issue, but also in our own personal formation as people and groups as we learn how to discuss it. And quite honestly, I have hope that we as the Christian community will handle this discussion well, right? It's not even just the discussion we have, but can we do it well, thoughtfully, and together, and and hold to differences of opinions as we go through it.
Yeah, no, I think that's really well said. And so obviously, like with wisdom and intentionality and great discernment, as we think about, as you've been engaging with artificial intelligence and different tools and technologies, whether generative AI or whatnot, like what is one area that you're excited about when thinking about artificial intelligence and the church in terms of how it can support ministry and support like in local contexts?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different areas where it can be beneficial. I think one of the things that I get excited about the most for me is the potential for AI to bridge gaps and divides that we've not been able to cross before. And for local congregations and churches to minister outside of their constraints, I guess. And so one of the big ones for me is language. I was talking to a person at the same gathering who was trying to encourage pastors and other people to start holding French language services. So obviously in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, and Canada in general, large French and Acadian populations, a lot of French speakers. The churches that he was part of, a Baptist tradition, maybe not having as many churches in the French language that we could or should. But language is a barrier. And the way that we've had to deal with that before is you have to go and immerse yourself and learn the language and get to a point where you can do that translation or whatever. And that's a high bar for some. Some people are really good at languages. I'm not. I barely speak English, quite honestly. But the use of AI, and so one of the things that we've seen is like real-time translation of speaking and translation, multiple languages for written content and speech. And so, we are so extremely close, and I'm expecting this kind of thing to be available, but even just having that real-time AI translation services, so somebody could come into your service, put in headphones from, dial in with their iPhone and be able to listen to what's happening in their chosen language. And so you could be simulcasting what's happening there in the service, both what's written on the screen and what's said over, in the space, into any language. And so this possibility of breaking down that linguistic divide while still honoring those languages. So it's not, so you're not making those languages go away. It's not a colonization of, just everybody learn English and do it this way, that people can still do that. And then for them to be able to speak back and to participate and have that translated for everyone else. For me, that's just one of those things. And I think there's a number of different ways, culturally, physically, like geographic boundaries and that sort of thing, that AI will help be able to break down those barriers, towards that great, vision of, every tribe and tongue and nation, like, the end scene in Revelation. It's not a scene of a monolinguistic gathering, right? It is all of them together. And some people might accuse us trying to build the Tower of Babel again. I don't know. I don't think it is. I think this is a valid use case for us to be able to do it, and affordable and easy and doable by the average local church. Right? Like, we're not talking just like mega churches with thousands of dollars to hire interpreters and whatever. No, like, this technology, a lot of this stuff that's coming out is being built in. I mean, here we are recording this, the software we're using can do real-time transcription, and it can translate that into other languages. And, so this stuff is easily within the reach of, the vast majority of churches. So yeah, that's just one of many areas where I see great hope and good things that could come, from adopting different AI technologies.
Oh, that's awesome. And obviously there's lots of different examples. And as you said, the technology, Amy Webb, a famous technological futurist, talks about this is the worst that AI technology will ever be. And so I just love that quote, because it says things are just only going to get, and it's not a linear, it's an exponential growth in terms of the technology and what's available. So that's a lovely, I think, a really exciting area. As we kind of conclude and kind of come to the end, and it could be related to artificial intelligence or just in general, because I know you talk to a lot of people and you're in a lot of different spaces, but when thinking about the future church and where we could be 10, 20, 30, 50 years, where do you find hope? Where are you excited or hopeful?
Yeah, first and foremost, my hope is in Jesus, and it's not in any individual local church or leader. Fixating on the author and finisher of our faith is, for me, is fundamentally important. And it's so easy today, I think, to get caught up in within new technologies and that sort of thing. And so some days I can be really hopeful because I see this great, amazing use of AI for use in the church or in education, and I have to push against that for myself internally and kind of just reset that in myself of no, this might be good. It may not be, but it might be. But that's not where I need to hang my hope. I have to hang my hope on Jesus. But beyond that, I see the destabilization of the institutional church is both scary and hopeful at the same time for me. There are many positive things that we have inherited from previous generations, especially around the structure and the institutional nature of what church is. Connections to other people. We've been gifted resources here at our seminary. This was built by the people who came before us who believed in the institutional nature of theological education and the church, and our church buildings, for better or worse, all of these. There's many, many layers of things and organizations and structures and partnerships that are good. However, at the same time, institution and that kind of structure around religion can and has stifled the church, the spirit. And for a younger generation coming in, I deal with this all the time as a fundraiser, and raising money for the seminary. People used to give because, well, this is the Baptist seminary, so of course I'll give to the Baptist seminary. They had a sense of this institutional loyalty, and that's not there in my generation, your generation, younger generations. We don't give because of that. We don't feel that same kind of loyalty. We maybe say, hey, I'll give because you're doing good work. I see your impact. You're making a difference. And for me, when that comes down to the local church, and as that starts to erode, it's a little bit scary. What's the purpose of a denomination anymore? Why should I care about that church? Why should I give there? That kind of gone. But the freedom that it brings for us to reimagine our faith, to take that gospel message in fresh and unique ways. I think the handcuffs are off like they've never been before. We have such great freedom to do things differently now. I don't think we always know what to do with that. Sometimes that leaves me, I don't know about you, sometimes that leaves us floundering, and we need a little bit of help sometimes maybe focusing that in that freedom. But it's just, in some ways it feels like I don't want to oversell it, but almost a new reformation in this way of being in the way, and relating to each other and to Jesus, and to do that. And that gets me excited. It's hard, because the thing about institutions is that it gives you a structure and a template, and you can kind of just go and do the thing. Like, well, we know how to run Sunday school, right? We have the curriculum, we have the format, it's worked for 100 years. Just do Sunday school. And then when you say, well, Sunday school's not working anymore, we need to find a new model of how do we, introduce children to Jesus. And then you kind of have freedom to do whatever, but that also means you have to be creative and courageous, and, to take risks and to fail, and to take another risk and to fail again, and take a risk and something work, So I think Christianity has done well when it has had the freedom, when those new, fresh expressions have come. And we're living in a time, I think, that affords us great opportunity to do that, while we still have the remnants of institution that are helping, but now the freedom to leverage those and to do and try new things. That gets me excited. That gives me hope.
Oh, I love that. I think, the understanding of there are good things that are in place that we can learn from our history. We can hold principles, but then looking to the future and considering how do we bring these into a new context, a new place. I think that's hopeful.
And a challenge for us to do the same. Like, how do we ensure, here I am, I'm in my early 40s, standing on the giants of the people who came before, who put things in place that have led me in my faith development, in my churches and institutions and training and education, and how do I do that for the next generation? It's going to look different, but it's a call for us to be thinking like that as well.
Oh, well, I think that's a perfect spot for us to wrap up and conclude. And John, as always, I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that you bring to these conversations, and just the vast engagement that you have around what's emerging, both in the tech space, but also the thoughtfulness around, like, what does this mean? And then the final kind of emphasis of, we're in an interesting season as a church, and how do we have hope, and how can we be innovative, and how can we be creative, and also how can we be faithful? And so and there's probably more than one way to be faithful in this season, and so working together to do that is a beautiful thing. Well,
thank you for the opportunity. I love talking about this, and for the folks who are listening, I'd love to enter into conversations. So if there's ever a time that either myself or some of our other people around the halls of Acadia Divinity College can lean into conversation with you, we would always welcome that. So feel free to give me a shout, and we could talk more.
Amazing. All right. Thanks, John.
All right. Thank you.